Imagine a vast ocean, waves crashing against wooden hulls, but these ships aren't carrying soldiers. They're laden with crates of silk, spices, and gold. No banners of war flutter in the wind. Instead, ledgers and contracts whisper promises of prosperity. Yet, from these quiet exchanges, empires rise that span continents, shaping destinies without a single battle cry. This is the paradox of power, how dominance is forged in markets and harbors, where influence flows like currency, binding nations in webs of mutual need, in a world obsessed with conquest. The true architects of empire often wield pens and purses, not swords. The seeds of this silent expansion trace back to antiquity, when resource-scarce civilizations turned to the sea for survival. Around 1200 BC, in the Mediterranean, the Phoenicians, a seafaring people from modern-day Lebanon, built a network of trading outposts from Carthage in North Africa to Cadiz in Spain. Lacking vast armies, they thrived by exchanging purple-dye timber and glass for metals, establishing colonies that doubled as commercial hubs. Their alphabet, read through trade pacts, became the foundation of Greek and Latin scripts, embedding their cultural legacy across regions they never militarily subdued. Similarly, ancient Athens, perched on rocky soil with little to farm, imported grain from the Black Sea and exported olive oil and pottery. Maritime trade fueled its golden age of philosophy and democracy. By the 5th century BC, Athens controlled a league of city-states through economic alliances. Tribute flowed not from fear of invasion, but from the lure of protected shipping lanes and shared prosperity. As centuries unfolded, this model evolved in the labyrinthine canals of medieval Europe. Venice, a cluster of islands in the Adriatic, rose from obscurity in the 9th century to command a sea-based empire stretching to Crete and Cyprus. Without a standing army of conquerors, Venetian merchants monopolized the spice trade from the east. They used sophisticated banking systems to finance voyages and forge alliances with Byzantine emperors. Their galleys, protected by naval patrols funded by trade tariffs, carried silks from China and peppers from India, generating wealth that built the opulent Doge's Palace. Their rival Genoa mirrored this approach, establishing trading enclaves in the Crimea and Levant through diplomatic treaties rather than sieges. These Italian republics demonstrated how economic leverage could extract concessions. Local rulers granted tax exemptions in exchange for loans and luxury goods, creating dependencies that endured for generations. By the 15th century, Venice's annual trade revenue rivaled that of entire kingdoms, proving that control over supply chains could eclipse territorial grabs. The turning points came with the age of exploration, when chartered companies blurred the lines between commerce and empire. In 1602, the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, was founded as a joint stock enterprise. It amassed a fleet of 150 ships to dominate the spice trade in Indonesia and Sri Lanka. Without direct orders from the Dutch crown, the VOC negotiated treaties with local sultans, built fortified trading posts, and enforced monopolies on nutmeg and cloves, which fetched prices 14,000 times their cost in Europe. This private entity raised its own capital through shares, hired mercenaries for protection, and even minted its own coins. It was effectively governing vast territories through economic incentives and blockades, not full-scale invasions. Across the Channel, the British East India Company followed suit in 1600. It started as a modest trading venture but evolved into a de facto ruler of India by the 18th century, through shrewd diplomacy and financial loans to mule emperors. It secured exclusive trading rights, amassing fortunes from tea, cotton, and opium. By 1800, the company's revenues exceeded those of Britain itself. This perfectly illustrates how debt and market access could subjugate without armies marching. These mechanisms reveal the intricate systems at play. Trade creates asymmetries where one party's goods become indispensable, fostering reliance that borders on control. Investments pour in, building railways and ports that tie local economies to foreign hubs. This was seen in the British informal empire in 19th century Latin America. After gaining independence from Spain, countries like Argentina and Brazil borrowed heavily from London banks to fund their infrastructure. They repaid these loans with exports of beef and wheat, Tailored specifically to British demands, this financial web ensured policy alignment. Tariffs were lowered and markets were opened, all without colonial governors. Similarly, the United States extended its influence in Central America through banana plantations and railroads owned by companies like United Fruit, which dictated terms to governments via economic pressure. The data underscores this dynamic. Global trade has lifted over 1 billion people from poverty since 1990, yet it often concentrates power. Developed nations export stable manufactured goods, while developing ones face volatile commodity prices. This leads to imbalances where the terms of trade can favor the former by up to 20% in income gains. In today's interconnected world, this blueprint persists through soft power and economic diplomacy, where influence accrues without overt force. After World War II, the United States rebuilt Europe with the Marshall Plan. It disbursed $13 billion in aid, that's over $150 billion today, not as charity, but to create markets for American goods and counter Soviet expansion. Hollywood films, jazz music, and blue jeans exported democratic ideals, attracting allies through cultural magnetism. By the 21st century, tech giants like Google and Apple wield similar sway. Their platforms shape global discourse and economies without borders. Meanwhile, China's Belt and Road Initiative, launched in 2013, has invested over $1 trillion in infrastructure across 150 countries. It's building ports in Pakistan and railways in Kenya. These projects secure resource access and political loyalty through loans and contracts, echoing ancient trade routes but on a planetary scale. As trade boosts global incomes by 24%, it also amplifies geopolitical leverage, turning economic partnerships into spheres of influence. Yet, this path to empire carries shadows. Dependencies breed resentment, volatile markets can spark crises, and cultural exports can erode local identities. True power, then, lies not in domination but in mutual elevation, where trade fosters shared growth rather than extraction. As harbors bustle anew in our digital age, remember the Phoenician sails. Empires endure when they are built on value, not violence, reminding us that the mightiest legacies are those woven from threads of connection. Ever wondered how an empire is really built? Forget the clash of swords and the roar of cannons for a moment. Look closer. History reveals a quieter, more powerful weapon: the flow of money, goods, and ideas. This is the story of empires that didn't just conquer land, but conquered the very currents of trade itself. Our story begins in 1453, Constantinople. The smoke has barely cleared from Mehmet the Conqueror's cannons. But soon, his descendants, the Ottomans, discover something far more valuable than shattered walls. They reopen the ancient Silk Road. Instead of just raiding, they tax it, they protect it, and they let the caravans flow. Suddenly, the heart of the empire isn't the battlefield, but the bustling markets of Aleppo and Bursa. Ottoman merchants are selling Iranian silk to Venetian traders, Indian pepper to Polish nobles, and Yemeni coffee to the entire world, all without leaving the safety of their own borders. The Sultan's treasury isn't filled by plunder anymore, but by customs duties. In just 1 century, the empire's revenue from trade skyrockets, growing 4 times over. They didn't annex a single new province. The map stayed the same. But the influence of Istanbul, carried on the backs of camels and the sails of merchant ships, reached further than any army had ever marched. Now, let's fast forward to the late 19th century. A small island nation on the edge of Asia, Japan, watches in alarm as Western gunboats blast open China's ports. Japan has no colonies, no vast resources, almost no coal or iron to speak of. So, what do? Instead of trying to build a fleet of battleships to match the West, the new Meiji government takes a different path. They build silk factories and shipyards, financed with foreign loans. By the year 1900, raw silk is Japan's #1 export, its profits paying for British steel and American oil. Japanese trading houses, the famous Eibatsu like Mitsui and Mitsubishi, don't just sell goods. They set up offices in London, New York, and Shanghai. They gather intelligence, they buy patents, they secure supply chains. While they did annex Korea in 1910, their true empire was being built elsewhere. It was built in textile mills that put factories in Manchester out of business and shipping lines that controlled half the world's silk trade, and in banks that were now lending money back to the very same Europeans who once looked down on them. By 1930, Japan became the world's largest exporter of cotton cloth, a global economic powerhouse, all without firing a shot outside its immediate region. The lesson was clear: economic infiltration first, flags and armies later. Let's journey south, to a tiny, swampy island in 1819. A man named Sir Stamford Raffles steps ashore, plants a British flag, and makes a radical declaration for the time: free trade. No tariffs, no restrictions. He calls his new port Singapore. Within 50 years, this muddy backwater transforms into the busiest port between India and China. People from all over the world, Chinese, Arabs, Indians, Europeans, foreign, all drawn by a single, powerful promise: you can get rich here, and nobody will care where you came from. By 1900, Singapore is handling more cargo than Hong Kong and Bombay combined. The colonial government barely spends a dime on an army. Why would they need to? The Royal Navy ships in the harbor were a good deterrent, but the real defense was the ledger book. Every ship that docked paid fees. Every worker who arrived bought rice imported by British firms. Every tin mine in nearby Malaya shipped its ore through Singapore's banks. Even when the Japanese captured the city during World War II, the underlying economic network remained. After independence in 1965, Singapore's visionary leader Lee Kuan Yew didn't change the formula. He supercharged it. Zero tariffs, an ironclad rule of law, English as the language of business, and an open invitation to every multinational corporation on Earth. Today, on a tiny patch of land with zero natural resources, Singapore's port moves a seventh of the world's shipping containers. And its government investment fund owns pieces of prime real estate in places like Manhattan. Now, let's shift our gaze to the desert, to the year 1971. A handful of small sheikdoms on the Persian Gulf, with a combined population of less than 500,000, suddenly find themselves sitting on an ocean of oil. It would have been easy to spend it all on lavish palaces and luxury cars. But a young ruler in Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan, made a decision that would change the future. He decided they wouldn't just sell oil, they would sell the future. While their neighbors built up armies, the United Arab Emirates built airports, airlines, and massive free trade zones. Dubai created Jebel Ali, the largest man-made harbor on the planet, and made an irresistible offer to the world: set up your company here, 100% foreign-owned, with zero taxes for 50 years. Fast forward to today, and oil is less than 1% of Dubai's GDP. The city has become the logistics hub for half of Africa and South Asia. It's the gold market for India, the re-export center for sanctioned countries, and a safe deposit box for the world's wealthy. Millions of tourists, millions of tons of cargo, and skyscrapers that defy gravity, all built on a strip of sand that has never grown a single grain of wheat. No army was needed. Their weapon was something else: certainty. The certainty that your container will clear customs in hours, not weeks. The certainty that your money will be safe. The certainty that your business will be welcomed. That kind of certainty is worth more than a fleet of tanks. Finally, we arrive at the ultimate empire, one that needs no flag, no territory, and no standing army. The empire of the dollar. After the old global financial system collapsed in 1971, the United States made a quiet, game-changing deal with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis agreed to price all their oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, America would guarantee the kingdom's security. Soon, every other oil-producing nation followed suit. This meant that to buy the energy that powers the modern world, every nation on Earth first had to get its hands on US dollars. How? By selling their goods to America or by borrowing from American banks. By the mid-1980s, over two-thirds of all global currency reserves were held in dollars. The SWIFT network, the messaging system that underpins international finance, became the nervous system of the global economy, quietly controlled by Western banks. To be cut off from SWIFT, as happened to Iran and Russia, is to be economically suffocated overnight. No invasion required. The United States has spent trillions on its military, but its real power, its real moat, might be the simple fact that countries like China, Germany, and Japan willingly hold trillions of dollars in U.S. government bonds, simply because there is no better, safer alternative. When the U.S. Federal Reserve raises its interest rates by just 0.5%, entire economies from Argentina to Turkey can be thrown into crisis. That is a different kind of power, one not measured in military divisions, but in financial basis points. From the Ottoman Silk Road to the Singaporean free port, from Japan's export-led rise to Dubai's desert metropolis and the unseen empire of the dollar, the greatest conquests in history haven't always been about who has the biggest army. They're about who controls the flow. The flow of goods, the flow of capital, and the flow of trust. It's an empire built not on maps, but on ledgers and shipping lanes. It's a reminder that the most enduring power is the one you don't always see. Did you ever wonder what an empire in the 21st century really looks like? Forget legions and battleships. The new empires are quieter, built not with soldiers, but with supply chains. Let's start in Guadalajara, Mexico. A factory there suddenly wakes up, humming with activity. Why? Because a server farm in Oregon just ordered more chips. Thousands of miles away, a copper mine in Zambia triples its shifts. The reason? A cable plant in Vietnam needs wire for the new iPhone. And in the Atacama Desert, a lithium brine flat pumps harder because a data factory in Shanghai just added a third shift. None of these places were invaded. No treaties were signed at gunpoint. Yet, every government in this chain adjusts its laws, its currency, even its night shift wages, just to keep the line moving. That, right there, is the sound of an empire being built in real time, one purchase order at a time. Now, let's zoom in on the quietest superpower on Earth, Taiwan. Its population is just 23 million. Its military budget is smaller than Singapore's. Its army, it couldn't occupy a medium-sized province. But here's the thing, in 2021, a single company on that island, TSMC, slowed production for just 48 hours because of a power glitch. The result? The global auto industry lost $2.4 billion in 1 week. Ford had to shut down plants in Michigan. Volkswagen stopped production lines in Wolfsburg, Germany. Toyota idled factories from Kentucky all the way to Kyushu, Japan. Think about that, one island, with no colonies and no aircraft carriers, brought 3 of the world's largest economies to their knees without firing a single shot. Advanced chip manufacturing has become the new spice route, the new Silk Road. And Taiwan controls an astounding 90% of the most advanced chips, the ones below 7 nanometers. The world pays tribute, not with gold, but with trillion-dollar order books. Now, let's pan across the Pacific to another kind of empire. This one is a company that owns no ships, yet moves more cargo than the entire British Empire did at its peak. You've probably guessed it, Amazon. In 2023 alone, its logistics network handled 13 billion packages. It operates 450 million square feet of warehouses. That's an area larger than Manhattan, scattered across every single continent except Antarctica. And here's where it gets interesting. When Amazon decides a city deserves same-day delivery, what happens? Local governments race to widen roads, rezone land, and offer massive tax breaks. It's exactly how medieval kings used to offer special privileges to Venetian merchants to get them to set up shop. Jeff Bezos never asked for sovereignty over these places. He didn't have to. He simply made convenience addictive, and nations, cities, and towns surrendered a piece of their autonomy voluntarily. But the deepest, most invisible empire of our age has no flashy headquarters. It operates from an unmarked building in Brussels and a data center in Virginia. Its name is barely ever whispered in public, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, better known as SWIFT. What is SWIFT? It's the plumbing of the global economy. 11,000 banks across 200 countries use its network, sending 44 million messages a day. Every cross-border payment, every central bank reserve transfer, every dollar sent home by a Filipino nurse in London to her family in Manila, it all passes through SWIFT pipes. It's the circulatory system of global finance, and with that control comes immense power. In March 2022, when the United States and Europe decided to disconnect just 7 Russian banks from the system, Russia's foreign trade collapsed by 40%. Overnight, no tanks crossed borders. No embassies were stormed. It was just a few lines of code, and a G20 economy was partially unplugged from the 21st century. That is sovereignty, outsourced to a Belgian cooperative. And yet, even this powerful system has a challenger rising in the east. China's cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPS, along with its digital yuan trials, now has a footprint in over 140 countries. In 2024, for the first time, Saudi Arabia began accepting yuan for its oil payments. Brazil and Argentina are now settling their trade in yuan. The threads of the global financial web are slowly being rewired. The empire of the dollar, which was built without armies over 70 years, now faces a new empire being built without dollars. So what's the common thread here? Every empire we've looked at, from the ancient Phoenicians trading purple dye to Amazon delivering your package, rests on the same 3 pillars. First, they control a scarce resource the world cannot live without. It used to be spices, silk, or oil. Today, it's advanced chips, instant convenience, or access to the global dollar system. Second, they create a frictionless system that makes everyone richer by joining it, and much, much poorer by leaving it. It's a network effect. The more people use it, the more indispensable it becomes. And third, they hold a quiet monopoly over that system, defended not by legions and armies, but by making the cost of leaving unbearably high. The age of conquering territory isn't over because we all suddenly became saints. It's over because we discovered a far more efficient weapon: dependency, cleverly disguised as partnership. So the next time you see a massive container ship gliding into port, or swipe your credit card in another country and it just works, or marvel at how your phone was assembled from parts made in 50 different countries without a single customs war, remember this: the most powerful empires in history never needed armies. They just needed you to need them, more than they needed you. And right now, at this very second, somewhere on this planet, a new one is being born. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing for more deep dives into how our world really works.